Restoring Men in History, 4 clips. Nick Freitas talking about men, fathers. The first 3 clips are the setup. I believe we've got 3. And then the last clip is the one you really want to watch. What happens when this happens and the why. What could happen if we don't stop it? What are we going to do as a society to help young men and men? That's one of the purposes of Restoring Men in History. So, hey, build men, build minds. Let's go. Clip 1.
I think one of the major problems as well, as somebody who saw it firsthand when I was teaching in areas where most of the kids didn't have a dad. It's very difficult to become a man if you don't have a positive male role model. If all you see are women and the men in your life, they're either absent by choice or absent because they're in jail.
Yeah. Well, and then one of the problems we have too in the United States is absence because the state intervenes in such a way as to disadvantage fathers when it comes to custody. We pay women to leave and take the kids. Now, there's certainly circumstances where that's absolutely appropriate. You know, if you have a man that's being abusive, well, then yeah, of course I want that woman to be able to get away from him, and I want her to be able to have the resources to do so. But to your point, Patrick Moynihan was talking about this problem in the United States with respect to fatherless homes in the 60s, and he was being called a racist then. If you look at how the trends have developed over time, almost every single demographic within the United States is now dealing with a significantly higher percentage of fatherlessness than at any point in the history since we've been keeping numbers in the United States.
So just to throw in a little stats in here from Fatherhood Initiative states, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, I believe this was 2023, and we've done a whole video on fathers, but let's state this one. 17.6 million children, nearly 1 in 4, and this is atrocious, live without a biological step or adoptive father in the home. Now that's 17.6 million children, nearly 1 in 4, 25%, that don't even have a father in the home. That's enough, the article says, to fill New York City twice or Los Angeles 4 times over. Now, let's break this down. That's absent dads, fathers that aren't in the home. But what's a big portion, and what did we see with some of the school shooters when we looked into it? Uninvolved fathers, which are hard to track, right? They're living in the house, but Brian, they simply don't throw a baseball, throw a football, do anything, aren't involved, right? That's what we're going to call uninvolved. They just don't do much with their boys. 3, dads that are just selfish into themselves and don't spend much time or teach at all. Same thing, that's kind of uninvolved fathers, but it's a little different. Not just being uninvolved, but they're actually enormously selfish. Another type of dad. And I'm sure there are others. Dads that are whipped and run by their wives, which don't show a leadership good example. The wife's running the family and the man's kind of just there. And I've talked to these guys. Remember, we run men's groups. We talked to a lot of different men over the last decade that are run by their wives. They don't go out if their wives don't let them. That's the boy sends the message, the mom's in command and in charge. And of course, they might go to, I've heard what they do. They watch football all the time in sports, which there's nothing wrong with that. You can watch sports. I'm not knocking it. But they tell me they kind of just watch a game or two with a kid or support a game. They might go to a game or two, but their wife runs the show. And they're kind of very, whip dads when the woman's in charge. All right. And then the boy's not seeing a role model of how to lead the family and how to lead his girl, right? And how to lead his wife and how to protect and guide and everything, right? And 5, you got 5 dads that are just bad, whatever it is the case may be, just bad dads. All right, and you've got other types, I'm sure, but how many dads are out there active involved? You want a great republic and a great society, have involved dads. You want a great society, have strong men. What creates strong men? Well, one part of the ingredient is an involved father, their father. So lack of role models, lack of leadership, lack of discipline. How do you become a man if you can't see it? Where are you going to get your role model? Schools, media, Marxism, feminism, all of that working against men along with, you start with an uninvolved father, and then you've got Hollywood, and you've got toxic masculinity being thrown at you by Hollywood celebrities in Hollywood and the media and the schools. Terrible combination. Where's that going to drive men to? Here's the setup. What will this make, all of this combined, and we're throwing some stuff in from the first video too, which we already did one video from Freitas. Marxism, cultural Marxism, that being driven in the schools, driven by Hollywood. It also talks about the courts, giving the boys over to the moms, and at a certain point, Moms just can't handle a kid, right? You can't discipline the kid. They're bigger, stronger, quicker. So you're not going to be able to handle them. They need a man. You need a man in the home. God set it up perfectly, right? A man and a woman. Mother nurtures. The man disciplines, and it works together. The man teaches you how to be prepared for dangerous situations so you can evolve in this world, right? Let's go up to clip 2.
The one demographic that has managed to stay far lower is generally the Asian community. But yeah, the thing is that a boy is going to become, a man, right? Or they're going to become an adult. And they're going to look around for cues on what that means. And one of the things I don't think has been properly recognized, especially by some of the people perpetrating this idea of toxic masculinity under very broad terms, is that those characteristics that we associate with masculinity, aggressiveness, competitiveness, capacity and capability for violence, those are morally neutral. They're going to manifest themselves in positive ways or negative ways. If you try to squash them, you don't fully do that. What you usually create is a man that feels emasculated, and a lot of times that ends up manifesting itself in some of the worst ways possible. Go look at some of the worst serial killers and look at the history of how they were treated when they were young and how that ended up manifesting itself. So I think it's about time that we understand that, look, we've all recognized, I mean, if we have categories of masculinity and femininity, and the reason why we have those is because we understand that there are certain traits that are generally associated to each.
So again, same thing, role models, you need a man in the house. He goes into emasculating men. So I don't have the stats on the serial killers that he goes into that. But hey, basically what's he saying? You don't have a role model, you have an uninvolved father. We know about the school shooters. A lot of those school shooters had uninvolved fathers. So what happens? Kids will manifest that, and it can be passive aggressive if emasculated. You can retreat and just be, stay alone. Or you can take action on that. So who's doing it? Who's going to turn boys into men? Because boys have to be made into men, right? Whereas women just become women, right? Well, at least they used to before feminism. But anyway, when they were able to see a role model. But now feminism pushes transgenderism, right? You might be a boy, so even girls are having problems. So understand the traits. Understand the positivity and the negativity. And manly virtues, masculine, we've gone over this. We got videos on this. Boys need a role model. That should come from the father, but unfortunately the father's not there. So where's it going to come from now? We'll get into that. Teaching what these mean. What do you do with these? Decisiveness, assertiveness. I'm throwing in different things that were not in the video, but we have this in our manly virtues, our decisiveness, assertiveness. He talks about aggressiveness. Also, there's competitiveness. How do you make these manly virtues and teach about them and educate them so that they're positive and you use them in a positive way, right? That's what a role model does. John Wayne films and the cowboys and other films, what does John Wayne teach? How to use virtues, Chisholm, in a positive manner. He's assertive when he needs to be, right? John Wayne's assertive when he needs to be, isn't he? He's aggressive when he needs to be. But I like the word assertive a lot. Decisive when he needs to be. Has courage when he needs to be, loyalty, and they're not going into all these virtues, but I am. Who's going to teach that? Where are you going to get your role models from? You're going to get them from Hollywood? I doubt it. Imagine a kid having an uninvolved father, never threw football, never threw a baseball, never taught him anything about sports, never taught him anything, never got him out camping, never got him out of the woods. The kid wasn't in Boy Scouts, so he couldn't get it from Boy Scouts either, and now Boy Scouts is totally different anyway. Where's he going to learn how to be a man? Let's go to clip 3.
The real question we should be asking ourselves is, what are the positive manifestations and the negative manifestations, and how do we foster the positive? And to try to do that without positive male role models in the life of a young man, especially the father's role, is incredibly difficult. It's not impossible, but it's incredibly difficult. And yet we have people, especially wealthier people, trying to glamorize this idea of, oh, girl, you can do it all yourself. You don't need a man. Like, okay, how's that working out?
Because one thing that I used to see a lot, so when I was teaching, you see the boy come from a single parent household and they'd be not fine, but they'd be coping better. The moment they hit puberty, mum wouldn't be able to control them physically because the boy is bigger, stronger, quicker than mum is. Desperate for male attention, especially from older boys, older men. If they're not getting it from dad, that's something that is really deep rooted within their psyche. They're going to look for it somewhere else, which is why they normally end up in a gang.
Yes, because all of us are looking for, all of us at a certain age are looking for a combination of community, belonging, and purpose. And that's what having a mother and father is supposed to be there. Because the mother and the father play unique roles both for the boy and for the girl as they're growing up. And having raised 2 daughters and a son, I can really see that. But if they can't find that, if there was an element missing from that, well then yeah, a young boy is going to obviously look to who are some of the older boys that seem strong, seem confident in who they are, even if they're not, right? If they give that appearance. I had a mother once ask me, she said, do you have any advice for a mother raising young boys? I said, yeah, I do. I said, understand something, because I was predominantly raised by a single mother. I said, the same thing that made your boy feel secure and loved when he was little makes him feel weak and vulnerable when he's older, and he doesn't want to feel that. And that's one of the reasons why having the father in the picture is so important, is that he helps the boy start to understand that the world is a challenging and dangerous place, and that he's not to be scared of it, he's to be prepared for it. He's to help mold it into something that is good, and to find positive outlets for those traits. But if you don't have that, and now all he's learning is from other boys that also didn't have it, then typically what ends up happening is none of them want to be vulnerable, none of them want to be hurt, none of them want to be taken advantage of. And so the way that they deal with emotions, the way they deal with threats or anything else is to resort to violence, because it's kind of the easiest go-to in those circumstances.
So he goes into men and boys need attention, and they want it from whom? Not their moms, from a guy, their fathers. If they're not getting it from their fathers, they will get it from somewhere. And this is, we do men's groups, so guys can come into it and get wisdom from other men. But they're desperate for attention, so they're going to get it. Where are they going to get it from? Where could they go? They could go to a gang. They could go to some hardcore religion, which is like, might give them structure and have definite roles for men and women, so you can see the attraction to a gang or the attraction to a faith. Now, what else do men need at a certain age? He goes into this, and we totally believe in this. Is a Restoring Men in History thing that we do and take action on. Men at a certain age need what? Community, purpose, and belonging. That's why we do the monthly groups in person with cigars, camaraderie, friendship, intellectual stimulation, because men need it, right? So we want you men to belong to something larger than yourselves, have a purpose larger than yourself, serving the United States, the Republic, or serving a higher purpose than just yourself. So if you have an uninvolved father, or you didn't have a father, maybe your father died early, get in a men's group or get in some men's group that has good virtues and values. You'll be the average of the 5 men you hang around the most, right? That's one saying. You can't just learn from women, your sister, your mother, your female teachers, and that. Now, another thing, you can join a gang, or you can join like the Muslim faith or something else, but there are we're not saying to do that. We're not advising to join a gang. There are online communities that are very negative. Brian, you and I have talked about this. I did a big piece on this, and Brian added some to it. But I did a real long piece on online communities, and Brian was telling me he'd researched it as well. And they grab you on one side, and then they'll try to convert you to transgenderism. So they grab you on a porn site and try to move boys to transgenderism and dressing as girls. So there's negativity on the web. So you've got the dark web, which I read a big piece at, that does these conversions. And then you've got the regular internet. You've got Hollywood. You've got cultural Marxism running through Hollywood. So look at all the forces that today are against men. And that's why we do the groups. And that's why we do this channel. And that's why we do the men's conferences, because we want you guys to have friendship and camaraderie. And if you haven't had a father, you need deep male friends that you talk to about everything and have camaraderie with. Smoke some cigars with, go shooting with, and don't hurt anybody. Now, there's also something else men can do, right, which is really bad: commit suicide. They can withdraw completely and isolate. Now, notice most of the things we're talking about today, you can all do, right? We're not saying you got to go get a Ferrari, you got to go to a mansion, and you got to get a big position and title. You can join a men's group. You can work on these virtues. You can get community, purpose, belonging. You can find a purpose and a why to live. All right, let's go to the next clip. It's pretty good. We're just going to let it play out, and then we'll comment after the other. Let's go.
Nick, It's been an absolute pleasure. Before we move over to Substack and get our supporters to ask you questions, our final question is always the same. What's the one thing we're not talking about as a society that we really should be?
Before Nick answers the final question, at the end of the interview, make sure you click the link in the description, head on over to our Substack to see this. How woke is the military now?
But is a delay in starting a family stopping the psychological development of adults?
And this is something the right has to figure out as well. We're really good at identifying all the things that we're very frustrated about. We better start providing a vision of what we actually want to achieve. Gosh, I think, I can't say that we're not talking about it. Because people like Douglas Murray, who you guys know very well, I think have talked very well about some of the problems going on with the West. And a good friend of ours, Rudyard Lynch from What If Alt Hist, has talked about this as well. But I will say that within the United States, and I think this extends to other places within the West as well, we cannot continue to see the drift that we're seeing where young women, 29 and younger, are polling as the most liberal and progressive they've ever been, and young men are polling as the most conservative as they've ever been. At the same time that we're dealing with this societal push for what can only be described as almost kind of this nihilistic, hedonistic view. There's that little Ford cycle, right? Strong men create, good times create weak men create bad times. I think it's a little bit simplistic, but not by much. We're at a point right now where young men are going to revolt. They are going to push back against this system. And regardless of what postmodernist philosophers think about equity within society, young men are the ones that possess the capability to impose their will. They're the ones that we use to fight wars. They're the ones that we use to police streets. You don't get to alienate and attempt to emasculate them forever without them standing up and having something to say about that. The question is going to be, who are they going to look at as their leaders in that process? Are they going to look at someone? Because I'll tell you what, it's not going to be wokeism. It is not going to be wokeism. You're going to get a version of masculinity which takes all of those masculine traits, looks at all the people that they think have attempted to emasculate them and says, unleash it on them. F those people. You can have another group of men, older men, that are telling these young men, yeah, that sucks. It shouldn't have happened, but we need you to be strong and we need you to be noble. You're right. They lied to you about these attributes, but you have to develop in the way that they're going to go, because the only way that you're going to save the sort of society that you want to live in, the only way that you're going to create it is if you stand up and you actually assume that role. And it sucks that you have to do it under these conditions, but you do. So let's do it. I honestly don't know which path they're going to choose. Right now, if I had to guess, it's not this one. And that is going to be very, very dangerous. Not for me, but it's going to be very, very dangerous for a lot of people that perpetuated this. And so they're going to have to wake up to the fact that for those of us that are trying to educate young men in a way that we think will use those traits toward a noble purpose.
So let's think about all the forces that are going against men: cultural Marxism, bad indoctrination in the schools, Hollywood coming at them, porn, all this stuff, porn and all this stuff coming at men. So he's talking about what could build up, a backlash could build up, right? And it can go many ways, right? He's talking about how they're going to use that aggression, and are they just going to loan, also what could happen, lone individuals committing negative actions, committing violence in schools or other places. So are we going to have men acting alone or with other groups doing bad things? Or are we going to have boys doing noble things? He thinks they're going to revolt, possibly, and do some bad things, he says there. We're hoping, and he's hoping too, I'm sure, they will do noble things, that they will be trained by us. And who's it up to? It's up to us. So he talks about they could be dangerous, and they could revolt, and they could do all these bad things. He also talks about, though, the good part, right? Those of us who are trying to educate young men in the way we think. And that's what we're doing here at Restoring Men, right? This video really applies to what we're trying to do with these videos, with the conferences, with the group. And whose job is it to instill these values? Well, it's the father's job, right? That's clear. Now, if the father can't do it, it has to lead to us, the men. Mentors or somebody else, or men's groups or something else. Somebody else has got to do it, or all those factions, the cultural Marxists in Hollywood, the progressives, the left, the feminists, they'll get them, or the dark web, or all those other things we just went through. They're going to go one direction or another, or they could just retreat and be nothing, or stay alone. I mean, there's always other options, or they could commit the terrible act of what we don't want them to do, killing themselves. But we are hoping, and we hope you will help us instill Aristotle, meaning just at your home. We're not asking for anything. You do it. And instill the Aristotle ethics and virtues. Instill the Bible virtues in them. Instill something good in them. Are they going to use the masculine traits for good and manly virtues for a noble purpose? Who's going to teach them? Us. It's up to first-class gentleman Jeff Snow, Matt Funicello, and all the great men in the groups. All you guys are going to help, and you are helping because you're in the rooms and you make great comments, and thank you. So you guys are helping. Who else? It's got to be all of society. If we want a great society and we want a great republic, we want strong men with good virtues. And I'll end with this TR quote. The future welfare of our nation depends upon the way in which we can combine in our young men, decency and strength. Theodore Roosevelt. Thank you.